Hey everyone. You know, this month is going to mark 15 years since WCW went out of business. Yeah, 15 years since WCW went out of business. And this leads me to want to talk about something. Now, I know in my reply video to Wrestling with Regrets, three topics that Brian Zane talked about in three separate videos about the NWO, the brand extension, and ECW. When I talked about WCW, I mentioned something that obviously, if you look here on YouTube and Google it, a lot of people, including Raven, Buff Bagwell, and several others, have all said that when the WWE bought WCW, basically the whole invasion angle was the shits. Excuse my language, God, but it was the shits. I mean, basically you took what was potentially could have been something good, even with the limited roster you had for WCW, and you killed it within a short span. I mean, quite honestly, even though we got vague details of what was going to be with WCW, had Eric Bischoff, Infusion Media, I think, bought the rights, or bought the rights, if you will. I think, in all honesty, just by the vague details we got, we might have probably had a better WCW product under under that umbrella than what we got with WWE. Now, I'm not trying to say that originally what WCW had planned wasn't going to be good, because it did sound apparently now that because it did sound apparently that they had something in the works. And when you look back on it and you hear what people say have been talking about, you read the details and everything. It's it definitely sounds like it could have been a good deal. It could have been a really good deal. There's no doubt about it. However, if what Marcus Bagwell says in some of his shoot interviews is true, then Vince McMahon pretty much didn't want anything to do with it right from the beginning. Even though for weeks he had planted the seeds and planted the seeds and planted the seeds of something happening with WCW. He just, come that following Monday in Atlanta, decided to, as I said in that one video, give the middle finger to that WCW home crowd and say, here, you want WCW? Here's WCW my way. I'm going to make them the bad guys. And oh, I'm going to do it in front of you, the very partisan WCW crowd. And that's what happened. But again, though, the potential, in my opinion, was there. The potential, in my opinion, was there. And here's what I'm talking about. Now, let's take out the fact that Tacoma basically booed the heck out of Booker T and Buff Bagwell. Let's take that out of the equation. Let's take out that very partisan crowd, okay? And look at the potential that was presented to us. The way they had promoted it throughout the night and the way it was being launched kind of made it feel very big, if not very special. And what I mean is, you were basically transitioning from a WWE product to WCW. And the way they made it go was just huge. To me, it was just, again, take that partisan Tacoma crowd out of it, and you had potentially something very, very special on your hands. You had something that potentially could have been good, could have been tremendous. But it was not meant to be. But again, this is something that could have been tremendous. Because basically, it was like just for 1 or 2 matches, you were giving WCW the spotlight. For 2 matches, you were giving them a chance to try to create something new, try to create something different. I mean, the potential, it was there. It was there. And to me, I think all Vince had to do, honestly, all Vince had to do, whether it was storyline or legit, was let WCW be WCW. Let the wrestlers, let the people that you may have brought in from WCW that knew the backstage workings of it, let them handle it. Let them not take control, but let them help out. Let them help kind of direct how things are done. Because if that would have been the case, if Vince McMahon would have said, okay, you were behind the scenes with WCW, show them how it's supposed to be done, so that you could differentiate the so that they can differentiate the 2 brands, so they can show the differences. Like what Marcus Bagwell. One thing that Bagwell would say and has said in his interviews is he was known in WCW for always getting in front of the camera. Even when he was a kid, he had to be front smacking the camera, front of the camera. He had to show off. But what happened was WWE said, no, you can't do this. You got to basically avoid the camera. And it's like, seriously, you're going to take something that was part of a guy's shtick in WCW and you're going to throw it away. And you're going to throw it away in potentially what is your first WCW match. Okay? All right, fine. That's one of the mistakes they made. Again, if they had any behind the scenes people working with them, whether it was Arn Anderson, whether it was John Laurinaitis, whoever, all they had to do was let those people give advice, kind of help the people at WWE out and say, okay, this is what you got to do. Like with Buff Bagwell, if they would have said, hey, Buff, he likes to be in front of the camera, he likes to show off his hat, likes to talk to the camera when he's going to the ring, let him do that, and that will and that will kind of show the difference between the companies. You don't let your wrestlers do it, but we let some of our wrestlers do it. That would show a difference. And to me, if those little nuances here and there that made WCW different, that got taken away, if Vince McMahon and his creative team would have just let those nuances be, and maybe get help, like I said, from maybe those behind the scenes that they brought in, then I think that could have helped in the potential of it. I think it could have. Now, here's another thing that potentially could have helped it. You could have dedicated the first hour of Raw to the relaunch. You could have given the first hour main event to that WCW Championship match. That way it's out of the way, it's done, and you have nothing to worry about. It's done, it's out of the way. This way, the Tacoma crowd, or whatever city you're in, whether they don't understand what's going on, or whether they're partisan or they're non-partisan, or they're split down the middle, to them, it would give it to them. It'd be like, okay, it's there. They know it's supposed to be, it's another company. They're relaunching. It's the competition of WWE that's relaunching under the banner of WWE. They would get a better understanding. Maybe you'd have people get behind it a little bit more had you done it in the middle of the show, basically the first hour main event. That way you could potentially look at the possibilities of saying, hey, first hour of Raw could be WCW related, second hour of Raw could be WWE related. And you could differentiate the two. Same with SmackDown. SmackDown could be, 1 hour could be WCW, 1 hour could be WWE. What have you. Or if you want to try to really establish it, you could make a half hour WCW. You could split the hours in half. The first half hour for WCW or WWE, the second half hour, that first hour for WCW, then that second hour continue WCW maybe, if you want to do that, and then close it out with WWE. I'm just saying. Or like I said, you could switch it around. You can make that first half hour of WCW, that second half hour of WWE, the next half hour of WCW, and then WWE. It works out. That way you're giving equal time to WCW, and potentially you're making it work. You're showing that it has potential to work. And you're getting the crowd at a time when you're getting a crowd at a time when they're still hot. They just got there. They know it's not time to leave yet because they got this other stuff from WWE that they came to see. You got them in the palm of your hands if you would have done it a different way. And that is the potential it could have been given. It had, if it was done correctly. If done correctly, that's the potential it could have had. Again, was Monday Night Raw. Again, you could have done it that way on both shows. Half hour to WCW, half hour WWE, half hour WCW, half hour WWE, or first hour of the shows to WCW, second hour to WWE. Equal it out. That way you got the crowd in the first half of that hour, in that first half of that 2 hours, still there, that are there because they want to see a main event of WWE, let's say featuring Austin versus Angle, or Austin versus Kane, or whatever. Fans pay to see that, they'll get to see it. But they gotta watch for a half hour WCW, half hour or an hour, they gotta watch WCW programming. They gotta sit there and watch it. And in that way, it gets them invested because they're going to watch it. They might not understand it at first, but sooner or later it'll get them more interested. And then you still have them then after they kind of get a little into it, they get in. And what I'm trying to say is, even after that, after they start to get a little into it, WCW kind of gets them into the vibe. All of a sudden, an hour or a half hour passes, here comes WWE programming. And there you go. To me, it would have worked if they would have done it in that kind of sense. It would have. But that didn't happen. But if they would have done it that way, potentially it could have worked. But they never did. They never did. And to me, that's what hurt it. It hurt it because they didn't know, like I said in one video, what they had. And as I said, they didn't allow any backstage people that may have carried over from WCW to the WWE with those same roles or similar roles. They didn't acknowledge them or didn't ask them for advice, maybe to how to do this to make the differences between both WCW and WWE. They didn't do that. Because had they gotten advice, had they worked with the people that were behind the scenes at WCW that carried over to WWE, it probably would have worked out. It probably would have. If they would have said, hey, look, let things be as it was here because that's how WCW fans know it, there you go. And maybe, in a sense, those partisan WWE crowd wouldn't have left the building the way they did, because they'd be like, oh, wait a minute. That's how that guy does that. That's how that guy or that gal does this thing in WCW, and they're doing it here. Okay, this is WCW. This ain't no WWE wannabe. Because I think what hurt WCW was, even though it was 2001, there were fans that were smart enough to realize this is not the real WCW. This is a joke. This is, as Eric Bischoff put it on his first night with WWE, this is a watered down version, if that. And to me, they got a point. But like I said, had they done it the way I suggested, and I think that's probably what they were aiming for, if you will, because at least you could tell they were dedicating 10 minutes each to WCW programming. If they would have slowly started with that, slowly increased it to maybe a half hour and then to an hour, it probably would have paid off. But they didn't do it. And honestly, I'm totally in agreement with anybody that said this in their shoots. I think Vince McMahon wanted nothing to do with WCW, but was thinking about relaunching it as its own entity, giving Raw to it, or giving SmackDown to either giving SmackDown or Raw to it for its own flagship show. But apparently something happened to where he realized, maybe he decided, you know what? What's the point? Why should I even do this? I don't know if maybe he saw the roster that he had and realized, you know what? No one's going to take this seriously. I'm just going to wipe my hands of it and be done. But I think one thing Buff Bagwell and anybody else has talked about in their shoot interviews about this has said about if Vince would have waited a week to Atlanta, I think they have a point. Because if he would have waited a week, given it more time to develop, more time to build, and you launched it and you relaunched it in the home base of WCW, Atlanta, Georgia, it would have worked out better. Because then that crowd would have been hot enough, not just for your product, but that crowd, 50-50 or 75% of it would have been a WCW crowd, and they would have came off on television, on live television, as acknowledging how big a deal WCW is. If Vince would have waited, and I do agree with this, if he would have waited one more week, he probably would have had a positive reaction to the product, to the relaunch, instead of a negative reaction. But again, we'll never know. We will never, ever know if that would have happened, because apparently, even before they got to Tacoma, he just wiped his hands of it. But we don't know. And the potential, though, that the WCW relaunch in 2001 had was not just the fact that you could have dedicated, it could have grown into something good, something big, especially if you slowly start out with dedicating 10 to 15 minutes of your programming to it, as well as slowly let that grow into maybe a half hour and then an hour, and thus you're accumulating this audience that's getting invested. I think it could have also helped out for a lot of the mid-card guys and a lot of the guys that were coming up for developmental. I really think so. I think that had been done right, the potential was you could have really allowed a lot of your mid-card guys that were drifting in limbo to have a place to go, be part of WCW, create maybe new interesting rivalries and feuds, as well as you would have a place for your developmental guys to go. You had a place for guys like, let's say a Brock Lesnar, let's say a Randy Orton, let's say a John Cena could have gone to, throughout 2001, use that as a way to get themselves over, and then move on the following year to WWE. I think it would have worked out. I think it really would. And then, if they could have done that, then again, if they would have gone and if they would have gone, if they would have done and gone in this direction, I should say, done and gone in this direction, um, they, like I said, they could have let those developmental stars do what they had to do there, move on later, next year or so, to WWE, and then that would give them plenty of time to let the contracts expire on guys like Hogan and Hall and Nash and all of them, and they could have brought them in to be part of WCW. But again, we'll never know. But the potential was there. Like I said, you were showing that you had that potential by dedicating 15 to 10 minutes of your product to them to get fans familiar with it. And you could have slowly, and had Vince McMahon not given up on it all of a sudden and decided to just use it as a stepping stone to show how superior he is, he in the WWE was or is, if he would have taken his time, given it another chance, let it grow, go from 15 minutes a segment to a half hour then later on to an hour, and then maybe slowly transition WCW to its own show, like let's say SmackDown or Raw, you could have potentially used WCW not just as a place to establish or reestablish a lot of this WCW, as I like to look at them, light roster, reestablish them in the eyes of a lot of fans, maybe get them familiar, maybe get some of the partisan WWE fans familiar with them, as well as reintroduce them to the WCW fans. But you also could, like I said, used it as a place for the mid-card talent to go if you didn't have nothing for them to do, so that wasn't always stuck in limbo and they had a place to go and maybe create some new rivalries and feuds, as well as you would have a place for guys like Cena, Orton, Lesnar, and Batista to cut their teeth at on a national level before moving on to the WWE the following year. And that potentially is what the WCW relaunch in 2001 could have done if given the chance. But it wasn't. Instead, it was turned into the joke that it was. I mean, what sense did it make? I mean, you go back and watch the network. What sense did it make for DDP to attack Shane McMahon? What sense did that make? What sense did it make for the WCW roster to attack Booker T, even though maybe a smart fan could be like, why did Mike Awesome stop for a second before he called Booker champ and then push him? To them, that's pretty much indicating something's up, right? And obviously it was. But again, what sense did it make overall? Whether the smart fan could figure out, oh, something's up. Why would he stall and calling Booker champ? Why? Why couldn't he say, oh, this doesn't concern you, champ, and just push him instead of go, this doesn't concern you, champ. And you're like, why is that? There's something up? Is there something more to it? Again, obviously there was. But, like I said, it's, it's like I said, what sense did it make? It made no sense. It made no sense to do that unless your original plans and intentions were to relaunch WCW slowly but surely, even before and after Invasion, and build to maybe something of a DDP feud with Shane McMahon. It's like I don't get it. What sense did it make? And what sense did it make for the roster to attack their own champion? Unless potentially you were planning something between him and either Awesome or him and Bagwell again. What sense did it make? It made none. Either there was something off about it or not, thanks to Mike Awesome's delayed reaction by calling Booker champ. There was no point to it, none whatsoever. Okay, because unless you were gonna, like I say, continue your WCW booking, kind of like I say, giving them 15 minutes apiece to to showcase their product. What sense did it make? It made none. It made none whatsoever. And I think that's probably, I think if you were to do a top 25 of the biggest botches for Botchamania, for you to do the biggest botches, number one would be this whole invasion angle right from the beginning. Well, not right from the beginning, but basically to me, one of the biggest botches. If you were to do a top 20, no. If you were to do a top five botches of the 2001 invasion angle, the biggest botch would be the WCW roster attacking attacking their champion, as well as previously having one of the guys attacking their owner, the boss, the owner of the company, the boss. It's like, that is probably the biggest botch ever if you were not going to follow up on it and not just use the first match of the night as a setup to establish, oh, now WCW's heels. It's like, that's the biggest botch in my opinion. And again, like I said, had they given it a chance, because I think Vince McMahon, this is my opinion, I think Vince McMahon had too much bitterness left in him, too much disdain for WCW left in him, that he let that override him. He let that override him to a point that he did not care. He just did, that maybe he was paranoid. Maybe he was afraid that people would like the WCW brand more than his, and maybe that's why he didn't. I don't know. That's probably the most logical reason. But again, the potential was there. And like I said, potentially everything that I've mentioned that could have been done, had they given it a chance and not botched it up, I think could have worked. I still believe, I mean, honestly, I stick by that. I believe that they would have slowly kept doing the 10 to 15 minute WCW segments, matches, if you will, to, showcase the product, and then slowly increase it to a half hour and then an hour, and then slowly transition it maybe after Invasion to its own show, either on SmackDown or Raw. I think it could have really helped out, not just establish, not just, get the WWE crowd and audience familiar with these WCW guys, but it also could have been a great, and reestablish them as well and reintroduce them to the WCW fan base. But it potentially, in my opinion, had been given the chance, could have been a great place for a lot of the mid-card guys, lower to mid-card guys to go to have a place, a lot of the mid to lower card, like I said, WWE guys to go to have a place to compete, maybe create new rivalries and feuds, as well as it could have been a nice platform on a national level for guys like Cena, Lesnar, Orton, and Batista to cut their teeth in before moving on to the main WWE roster the following year. To me, that's the potential that the 2001 WCW relaunch could have had. Yeah. To me, that's the potential that the WWE's 2001 WCW relaunch could have had. But you'll never know. But let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with maybe what could have been had they given it a chance? Or do you think it was doomed from the get-go? Let me know down below. I'll talk to you all later.